And then I think the final thing I'm going to talk about is what happens if you get denied? What can you do next? Well, I'm going to talk about appeals in the context of employment visa applications, investment visa applications, and the right of abode. In the right of abode, effectively, you have a legal right to be heard by a tribunal of esteemed peers. And there is, as I say, a formal tribunal in process. So when you make an application for the right of abode and you get denied, the Immigration Department will then advise you effectively what your rights are to the appeal tribunal, and you go there, and if the appeal tribunal on the facts believe the Immigration Department have got it wrong, then they'll reverse the decision and then they'll order the Immigration Department to go back and have another look at it. I think there were, last time I looked at the data, 236 applications in 2012 and only 2 got approved on appeal, which basically tells you that the Immigration Department normally get it right the first time around. But they're not infallible. So it could be worthwhile taking it to the tribunal if you feel that the Immigration Department got it wrong. On the other hand, if you made an application for a business investment visa or for an employment visa and the Immigration Department deny you, unfortunately the Immigration Department don't actually tell you why you've been denied. They essentially just restate the policy back at you and say, we're not satisfied that the criteria for approval are present. They will give you a bit of a hint in very broad terms as to what category of problem existed in your application, so that you can have a think about it. But they'll never tell you expressly in writing, because that then leaves them open essentially to litigation through the courts. So because it's all done on a policy basis, you get a very general idea of what the problem is. But your first avenue for appeal is to make what's known as a reconsideration application. And a reconsideration application means that you have to submit new and previously unsubmitted information that wasn't available to the Immigration Department at the time that they notified you of your original refusal. Normally there are very discrete reasons for why applications get denied. But if you genuinely feel that the whole story hasn't been told and the Immigration Department really need to know more about what's going on, and you can substantiate this new stuff through new documentation which adds weight to the original application, then you would travel down the reconsideration route first. If your application after reconsideration is still refused and you genuinely believe that they've still got it wrong, your next application is to the Chief Secretary under the Section 53 of the Immigration Ordinance, and that's where it's where you basically appeal to the higher echelons of government on the basis that you are aggrieved by the decision of an immigration officer. And the way this process works is that you write to the Chief Executive in Council via the Chief Secretary's office, and then the Chief Secretary's office tells the Secretary for Security to have the Immigration Department prepare a complete written report about your application and the justifications for the refusal. And that takes about 6 months. And then that goes off to the Chief Secretary, to the Secretary for Security's office, and then they send you a copy of those representations, so you know in great detail as to why you've been refused. And then you get an opportunity to comment on those observations of the Immigration, remarks of the Immigration Department. You can't raise any new facts at that point, but you basically have an opportunity to be heard. And then you put your submissions in writing, and that then goes into the Chief Executive in Council, and then the big wigs up there in the LegCo building will gather around, and they'll look at your application and they'll make a determination on the facts whether or not the Immigration Department got it right or whether they got it wrong, and then they will give instructions to the Immigration Department as to what the Immigration Department's next move might be if they feel that they've gotten it wrong. The problem is that that usually takes about a year and a half, between a year and a half to play its way through the process, and people's lives move on, and it's not a particularly practical avenue of appeal in my experience, but it's there and we've used it and we know what it looks like, but that's really sort of how it all works. And then the third avenue for appeal is not something that I would recommend. It's something that I've done once successfully and seriously considered a second time. But then the Immigration Department, at the end of the day, made the right decision and we didn't need to travel down that path. And this is where you appeal directly to the Chief Executive, because there's such a significant matter of public interest in play that the Chief Executive needs to intervene quickly to sort it out. I'll finish the presentation today on this case study, this story that we experienced. It was Asian economic crisis. We had a client, a corporate client from another jurisdiction that was moving into Hong Kong in a very big way to open a whole series of bookshops. And they were in the process of finalizing their first expansion into Hong Kong from this other country, and then they were going to be listed. And so the Hong Kong project was really important to them. And they had, I think it was five outlets originally slated. They'd opened two. Two were clearly in the pipeline, tenancy agreements signed and all the rest of it. And one was in the process of being opened and books were arriving. And what had happened was that the local HR had made an application for one of the managers of this books company from another country to come here, and had submitted a set of documentation that gave him the work title of a bookseller. Now, there was a branding strategic reason for calling him a bookseller, because this particular retailer was revolutionizing the way that books were sold, the way that the shops were laid out, the way the books were displayed, and actually the people that they hired, because what they did was they hired a certain type of person who was knowledgeable in a certain area of books. So they would hire somebody who perhaps had an accounting degree to work in the section of the bookstore that dealt with accounting books, or somebody had a law degree if they were dealing with law books. So their manner of retailing was very different, and part and parcel of that was to give the people that worked in the business these titles. And indeed, the junior staff, the shop floor staff, one of the things that they needed to do was to read 3 books a month from their section so that they could talk knowledgeably to customers about the books that they were selling. So this bookselling notion was wrapped up in this very sophisticated branding proposition. But of course, HR, who had submitted quite a few applications previously that weren't familiar with really what immigration is all about, just put these documents forward, and the immigration officer that was responsible for the application made a recommendation to deny it because anybody could sell books. What's so special about that? So when they came to me with this refusal, I said, oh, I think we can fix this. It's straightforward. Anybody can understand what this is really all about. Let's just educate the immigration department properly. So we did a reconsideration. 3 weeks later, they refused it again. I was confounded by this. And meanwhile, the client's getting extremely frustrated because the store is about to open. They've got all these employees that need to be deployed into the business. The books are piling up and need to be put onto the shelves and all the rest of this stuff. So we did another reconsideration and demanded an urgent determination on this next application. And a week later, they said no. And meantime, my client's saying, this doesn't work for us. We need to be able to know that we come into Hong Kong, that our transferring executives are going to be able to get immigration status, otherwise we've got no scalable business. We're going to be publicly listed. This is an integral part of our entire listing story. This is ludicrous, and I said, I agree with you. Now this was all happening in the backdrop of the Asian economic crisis when Hong Kong was losing, I think it was 20,000 retail jobs a week. It was just bizarre. So I said, right, well, what we need to do is appeal to the chief executive. So 1-page fax off to the chief executive with the file reference number stating what was at stake. The next morning I got a call from one of the assistants in the office, and they explained that the application had been sent on to the immigration department. That afternoon I got a call from the immigration officer that had been saying no throughout all of this time, asking for 2 or 3 pieces more of information. And 2 days later, we got an approval through that was subject to a review of this new business after 6 months, so that the Immigration Department could be satisfied that it was worthy of them saying yes, that is, changing their mind after this complete exercise, which was really just, a face-saving mechanism. But in the final analysis, they got the approval that they needed. The Immigration Department made the right decision, but we had to really work hard for that accordingly. But clearly, it was the matter of significant public interest at play here, because they were creating, I think, 100 jobs altogether at a time when these jobs were just being lost all the time. So there's an example of how you can take it one step further if you wish, but you need to be very careful about how often you do that. And I've only done it, as I say, once in 21 years, and I've only seriously considered it once, but never had to go through with it at the end of the day. So I think I've dealt with all the various immigration stati that are relevant to a foreign national that is coming to spend time in Hong Kong. So I'm happy to answer your questions.